Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Let's see, I've been asked to make a quick announcement about Granicus. That is our online streaming ability through GrassRoots. It is not functioning appropriately this evening, so if anybody is looking for this meeting, the best access for it would be City of Aspen YouTube. So we have a YouTube channel. We also have Facebook Live, but probably your best feed is the YouTube channel.
Whoever plugged their computer in over here, it's on audio, and it's talking.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Tonight, we obviously have a work session scheduled to talk about the Castle Creek Bridge and the entrance to Aspen, but before that, we did have some scheduled interviews for a board. We have the Kids First board that we were interviewing Ramona and Allie. I don't see Ramona in the room, and I don't see Allie online. So that being the case, we will.
Hi, I'm here. Allie.
Hi, Allie. Thank you so much.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. We recognize that you're traveling, so you could only make this by a remote meeting. So we'll just go ahead and get started. We don't have Ramona in the room right now, but she might be on her way. So we'll just go ahead and get started. This is an interview for Kids First. Allie, as you know, we've had some interviews for Kids First, and we recognize that you had applied, interviewed, but did not reapply when there was another seat opening up. So we got back in touch with you and the other candidates to see if there was still interest from you in applying. So thank you so much. Obviously, you have the interest. We've been through this once for you, with you before. I'll start off with just a quick question. You know, I guess my question to you is about working in a team setting, working on a board with other members. How do you feel your skill set is for working in a collaborative environment and doing good work on behalf of our community?
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for having me. And apologies, I'm coming back from Crested Butte, and I'm going into the place that everyone knows right before you get into Old Snowmass. So I may lose you, unfortunately, but I will do my best. Working in a group, I think that's what I do every day. Been working on teams since I started off as a teacher, and every job I've done since, work in a lot of startup environments that require folks to just work well and closely with each other, get to know each other. And that's what I'd be excited about with this position, is first really getting to know the folks at Kids First and others on the advisory board, and then others in the community, and really understanding what the needs are.
Thank you, Allie. As I asked you in the first interview, you are aware of the meeting times and the roles and responsibility of the Kids First board members. Is that correct? And that might have been all. All right, well, we'll see you back here in Aspen then. Thank you so much, Allie. Yep, that's frozen for sure. You can go ahead and disconnect with her. We'll have to figure this out at another time. Council members, sorry. With that, we're going to go ahead and get into our work session. So this is the Aspen City Council work session for Monday, August 5th. Our topic this evening is the new Castle Creek Bridge, or Castle Creek Bridge and entrance to Aspen, however you care to talk about it. With that, we're going to start off with a little introduction. I think, Sarah, you have a few words to say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the project team for both on the city staff side and Jacob's team are getting settled, I invite them to go ahead and come up, get plugged in, and so on for your presentations. Council, I just wanted to share a few words with you ahead of time, and recognize this is really, you're being presented with a question that is about conflicting values in the community of things the community holds dearly. And you're in a situation of leadership that you have to choose at times between values. And so I encourage you to be brave in your thinking, to be open to hearing lots of opinions, to ask clarifying questions to make sure you feel confident you understand the material, and ultimately thinking about generational solutions for our community, because that is truly who's going to be most impacted by your decision-making around the bridge. So we're here to support you tonight, and are happy to provide any clarifying information that we have available to us, and when you're prepared to receive any direction on how you'd like to proceed. As a reminder, we do have time scheduled also next Monday. We thought this was a lot of pretty dense material that might take 2 sessions really to absorb it, have a chance to react and think about it before council enters into its debate phase. So we will turn it over to the mayor to facilitate, and then we have a few comments from the team just to go over the flow of the evening. One thing, Mr. Mayor, could you please confirm for everyone in the room about public comment?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. So public comment this evening, we're not taking public comment. We're not opening this up to debate tonight. This is really information gathering. Obviously, we've gotten a lot of emails from a lot of different folks with different viewpoints. We've also gotten a few with some questions. Tonight, if you are sitting there with a burning question that you think is relevant to the information that's given, I encourage you, you can write it down. You can give it to me. If it is appropriate for the discussion this evening, for a clarification, I'm happy to enter it in. But we will have time for public comment, definitely at our next meeting, and we're going to figure out kind of a process to go forward. Obviously, this is a big community decision. We do want all of the public input, but not just your input, but also questions, concerns, and perspectives. With that, we're going to open it up to our team from Jacobs, and they're going to just give us a little overview of the presentation this evening. What we are planning on doing is having a little conversation about the current state of affairs and what has been signed, what agreements have been made. We're going to talk about some of the CDOT and Federal Highway Administration responses and coordination. We've asked for some more information about alternative footprints, sensitivity analysis, and the like, as well as we probably have a chance this evening to get into some traffic modeling if we can. Part 2 scheduled for next Monday. We're talking in detail more about the 3-lane bridge possibilities, S-curve refinements and possibilities, and economic analysis for some of these different alternatives. We will then have more of council discussion, debate. We would like to open it up to public comment at that time as well, but we will see if there's a better process for that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jacobs for just an introduction of their overview this evening.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you. I'm going to do a real quick introduction. And the staff team that's working on this project starts with Jen Newton, Carly McGowan, Lynn Rumbaugh, myself, Pete Rice. The Jacobs team, who's really worked hard in the short time frame, is Doug Strummel, Peter Cozy, and of course Jim Clark you've seen before. And I think as we go through this, the mayor just pointed out kind of the overall what we're going through tonight. Each section kind of leads into another piece, so we're kind of asking that we hold questions until the very end because of that setup. And then we can take your questions and concerns, and we have a week that we can respond to that. So I appreciate your time tonight, and I'll hand it over to Jim at this point.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah, thank you, Mayor Tory. You kind of went through the agenda for today and touched on the agenda for next week's meeting. I'll touch on just a few things that we also plan to talk about next Monday. That's the feasibility of not including a sidewalk on a 3-lane bridge replacement. Related to that, we're going to talk about the right-of-way needs for the 3-lane bridge options. That's something that the council wanted to learn more about. We're going to expand on the traffic modeling effort. You're going to hear some about it tonight because it relates to a lot of the results that are presented in our sensitivity analysis, but Peter will go into more detail about the traffic modeling next week. As noted, we did an economic impact assessment only for the construction phase. That's not a long-term assessment. And lastly, we've got some information next week about, related to questions from council about funding options, fiscal implications for self-funding, et cetera. So that's on the agenda for next week. So for tonight, we thought we would start with a refresh on a land swap that was done back in 2002. The reason why we wanted to talk about it briefly is it does influence or inform some of the results from our sensitivity analysis that we'll be talking about later. So as mentioned, it occurred in 2002. It was done back during the Maroon Creek roundabout design. And as noted here on the slide, the exchange or land swap was done for a 31-acre parcel known as Mills Ranch that's located next to the Brush Creek Park and Ride. And that was swapped or exchanged for properties on the Merle Thomas open spaces and as well as on the golf course property. And of note here, and as it relates to the sensitivity analysis, the Merle Thomas easement is encumbered. It is for transportation use.
Can you just tell us the old Mills Ranch, that 31.38 acres? What's the usage on that? Is it dedicated open space? Is it available for other city uses?
It was exchanged to both City of Aspen and Pitkin County in undivided interest, and it is designated as open space.
Thank you.
I would add there's currently portions of trails, a small portion of trails in that area, and the council has recently done a site visit around possible bike and pedestrian connection in this area.
And was this, because it involves open space in some way, was this a needed vote of the public to make this land swap? Or was this council and county, or how did it work?
The land swap was authorized during a public vote of the city of Aspen. I can't speak to the county's role.
And it was approved by council by resolution.
Right, so the approval of the land swap happened several years before 2002, actually, but there's an agreement between the city, the county, and CDOT that finalized the terms of that swap.
Thank you.
Question.
Yeah, go right ahead.
You mentioned that the Merle property easement is for a right-of-way. Do you know exactly how that was purchased and how, what funds are used to purchase that right-of-way? And does that right-of-way now belong to CDOT?
It's for CDOT use, and there was no dollars transacted. It was in exchange for the land. And some of the other land that was exchanged was some of the land around the golf course for the Maroon Creek roundabout. So that was part of the exchange as well.
Yeah, I think, Doug, it's actually a $10, it was a $10
Quick claim
exchange.
deed,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll buy that.
yeah,
Yeah.
not a
If I
bad deal.
can jump in for a second, this is all part of the 1996 ballot approval that allowed for the issuance of the easement that was done in 2002. The ballot issue did require that exchange of like property. And in that opinion I issued, I attached that particular 1996 ballot issue and the easement that is the one designated as transportation right-of-way in yellow above. And it was based on the position of the city at the time that the Merle open space was acquired for open space, with open space funds.
With open space funds?
That was the position, and the ballot issue very specifically said that the proposed easement that would be granted was done with Merle property that was acquired with open space funds. The ballot issue is, in my opinion, that I submitted. We can look at that if you wish.
So would an assumption be that if the public voted for the transfer of that land in exchange for the Mills Ranch property, that it was an approval for the use of that as a transportation corridor?
With specific designation as set forth in the easement as to what it would be used for, which is that 2 lanes of automobile traffic and a railway corridor.
And the HOV, or the bus lane?
That was not part of the 1996 ballot initiative.
Okay, thank you.
I will just add, that has been viewed as a interim solution for bus lanes. But again, as Jim said, it was not in the vote that authorized it.
Thank you.
Okay. Next slide, please. So as Mayor Tory mentioned, we were going to spend some time talking about responses we got from CDOT and FHWA. And these questions really, following the April workshop, there were a number of questions from council related to the record of decision, to the PA about funding options, and that did require input from CDOT and FHWA. So staff sent CDOT a letter back in May, and we received a response back in July. Our understanding is that CDOT worked closely with FHWA on the responses, and that legal counsels for both parties, or for both organizations, were involved in drafting the responses. Next slide. And
Hang on, stay there for 1 second. You have a question on that?
I do. If we do pursue a different solution, how long would a supplemental EIS take?
It really depends on the scope of that supplemental EIS. In other words, you know, if there are new alternatives or solutions that the city wanted to investigate, the extent of the analysis that would be required. So it's tough to answer. I think a good ballpark might be 1.5 to 2 years.
Thanks.
So this slide just presents the key takeaways from that letter. You know, in terms of the city, quote unquote, withdrawing from the record decision, the city is a cooperating agency to the EIS. The ROD is actually signed by CDOT and FHWA, and what the city indicated, or excuse me, what CDOT indicated was that there's no known process that they know of for a consulting party to, or cooperating agency rather, to withdraw from a record of decision. So they go on to say that the selected PA would remain in effect unless the signatories to the ROD either change or alter the ROD or withdraw the record of decision. And city staff had some questions to CDOT about, you know, if the city were to self-fund this, how that might change the situation with the PA and the record of decision. And CDOT was very clear that if city self-funds and or seeks state funding, the ROD would still remain in effect unless it's altered or withdrawn. Pursuing a new solution requires at a minimum a supplemental EIS. Or, you know, the implication here is if it's not a supplemental EIS, that would be the minimum approach. The other option presumably would be a brand new EIS. And this is consistent with what CDOT has said before in terms of new solutions that weren't studied in detail as part of the EIS. And lastly, city staff asked a question about devolution of State Highway 82. Devolution is, as most of you know, is a process whereby the State Highway Department would give ownership and management of the stretch of State Highway over to city or county. And in short, what CDOT said is that devolution could be a possibility, but the ROD would still remain in effect. Next slide. Excuse me. So using those responses from CDOT and some of the other analysis that we did, we conducted what we termed an alternatives footprint and sensitivity analysis. And the purpose of that was really twofold. It's to address questions from council about what some of the alternatives might look like in terms of footprint, width, right-of-way needs, et cetera. And therefore, bearing in mind what CDOT and FHW had to say about next steps and the real possibility for a supplemental EIS, provide some sort of indication about how those alternatives might fare in such a situation in some sort of new or revised NEPA evaluation. So as we talked about during the April workshop, if the city opts to pursue that route in terms of a supplemental or even a new EIS, the outcomes for that can't be dictated or predetermined. So what we did here was perform what we would deem a really high level assessment. And I'll disclaim this by saying that we don't really relish doing these types of things because as a NEPA practitioner, we really never know how those NEPA processes are going to turn out unless you actually undertake the analysis and do the detailed analysis and perhaps the most importantly, get robust public opinion on the trade-offs of the different alternatives. And certainly that was done back in the 90s when CDOT and FHWA did the original EIS. But we did put together this information in the hopes that it would help inform the council's decision-making in terms of next steps, pass forward, given the whole regulatory context and the limitations of the PA and the ROD. So next slide.
Before we go forward on this, a question. The ROD and EIS was community-driven and community input, community-based decision back when it was created. What has your experience been with CDOT as they have issued new record decisions or NEPA assessments as far as being accepting to community values and community input?
Well, when I first got involved in this project, I was surprised at the extent to which the community really influenced some of the decision-making back there in the 90s. And as has been talked about quite a bit, there are different reasons for that. I think the air quality non-attainment was a reason that the city was successful in influencing CDOT to pick the solution that was selected, one that didn't add capacity except for transit only. I think it's safe to say that back in the 90s, that was not the way CDOT typically did business, but they realized that they had a non-attainment situation and that was a solution they were willing to accept at that time. In terms of not having been here, as some of y'all were, I suspect that they also understood that level of community input was needed to get the record of decision to the finish line, to get it signed. To answer your question, I think that was remarkable at that time, and it's remarkable even in the last 10, 20 years or so. It's not common.
So just as a follow-up, if we reopen the ROD, it's reasonable to expect that we would not get the same amount of community input and values accepted by CDOT? Well,
it's hard to say. CDOT and FHWA, and certainly more so with the current administration, and you could say with the whole NEPA process, community input is valued and sought and used. It's hard to say about the same level of what weight that might carry. Getting back to the non-attainment issue, that, as most of y'all know, has gone away. What hasn't gone away and what is new our new greenhouse gas requirements, both the state and federal level. So a lot of those issues are still around, they're just in a different form. And what that translates to is the need, you know, if you look statewide at what CDOT is doing, they are meeting the state requirements for greenhouse gases by really promoting transit use as opposed to adding capacity. So I think if a new EIS were started, some of that certainly would play into what that process looked like. Again, it's hard to speak to the community input part of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and make a comment here, because Ward, you just made a couple that were characterizing kind of what happened in the past and where we might be in the future. But I'm not sure that I agree with the assumptions that you made there. I don't know how much of the community input drove the last record of decision process. For me, when I review it, and it's right here, when I review it, I see kind of some things that lead me to question about alternatives being explored, alternatives being weighed. You also had decisions at that time being made off of, for example, the public vote that was in order to exchange this land and do some right-of-way easements was predicated on a mass transit corridor light rail, valley-wide light rail. So things have changed since then, and I just don't know that I completely agree that necessarily the process that went in before was so community well-rounded as you described it. But to catch us up to the present day, you know, what I hope that we're talking about here is working with our partners at CDOT and the Federal Highway Administration, et cetera. We're looking for community solutions, and this should not be, and this is, I'm speaking to the people in this room as well. This is not us versus us or us versus them. This needs to be all of us working together, and that's the spirit with which we need to go into this with, especially with CDOT and the Federal Highway Administration. Thank you.
Okay, I was going to touch on the methods. Did we,
Yeah, it's not in here.
pardon me?
It's not, the slide's not in here.
Okay, all right. We'll touch on it as we go through. All right, Doug's going to speak to the alternatives that we looked at as part of the sensitivity analysis.
And before you do that, hoping that at some point there's a discussion about what the preferred alternative is.
Yeah,
If
that's
it's
part
in-
of this, yes.
Great,
Yes.
thank you very much.
Yes. So let's take a few minutes and look at the three alternatives we took a look at and weighed in this footprint and sensitivity analysis. And starting off with what we're calling the phase preferred alternative. So this is basically the modified direct alternative that's in the ROD, in the record of decision, except it's phased, okay? Phased being, we can use buses in lieu of the light rail transportation because light rail transportation is quite expensive, and you have a great bus system right now with REFTA. So we could repurpose one of the lanes to be a BRT and then another lane general traffic in both directions. So what we're looking at here is the alignment swings through that encumbered transportation right-of-way and connects up with 7th and Main. The purple shading you see there would be the new bridge over Castle Creek, and the green shading is representing the cut and cover tunnel that would be returned to open space. A few other features of this option would be a new signal at 7th and Main to allow those left turns coming in to go on North 7th. We'd also, the existing Castle Creek Bridge would remain. Cemetery Lane signal would be removed and then kind of converted into a free flow curve, basically. And then the abandoned portion of State Highway 82 between Cemetery Lane and where the new alignment deviates from the old alignment would be converted back to open space. So I know there was a lot of questions about, well, how wide is this? What does this look like when it comes across? So we plotted up some platform widths for you to look at here. The roadway we're showing here is 75 foot. That's 2 lanes in each direction with buses on the outside lanes and 6-foot shoulders and a 10-foot raised median. This is narrower than the 93.5-foot platform width that's in the ROD that also accommodates a light rail platform. So this would be a narrower platform for that phase solution. We would use 78.5 foot for the cut and cover tunnel. We'd have to have a little extra width in there for the future light rail if that would come through, just because you wouldn't want to come back and try to add that back in if that was a solution. You'd want to do it right away. So this is the same width as in the ROD. The bridge over Castle Creek would be slightly less than 75. It would be 73 feet because the barrier is a little bit less than the curb and gutter, but we'd still have 6-foot shoulders and a raised median across the bridge. So we took these widths and we imagined coming across Castle Creek. So this is a visualization as you come into Aspen. It would cut across the private property there. That's the Burger property. It skirts really close to the Burger cabin that's on the right side of the picture there. The Burger cabin shown there right now is in its current location. However, the ROD notes that it would be relocated to another location on the property. And we went in with that same assumption because that's what the ROD had. As you come into town, we develop a inside left turn lane. So that I mentioned those left turns can go up North 7th. And there'd be a new signal there at 7th and Main. You can kind of see the signals in the background there. Now this would impact the parking along the condos there. That's just on West Main. But that's kind of how this would, how we visualize this coming into town. It would not require any new right-of-way along West Main itself.
Thanks. Hang on one second, Bill. So in this, when I read the record of decision, it describes a 2-lane parkway with a transit corridor. When did it become 2 bus lanes, 2 general traffic lanes, and a transit corridor?
So the ROD, it wouldn't be all 5 of those things. The ROD allows for a phased solution. It says it right there on page 1 or 2 that it understands that light rail may be cost prohibitive and that buses could be used in lieu of LRT. So in the future when LRT would come in, the bus lanes would go away and then you would narrow.
If I may, I can just reference it. So it says the transit system for the preferred alternative includes an LRT system from a new LRT maintenance facility near Service Center Road to Ruby Park in downtown Aspen. However, the LRT system will be developed initially as exclusive bus lanes if local support and/or funding are not available. The platform is of adequate width to allow the exclusive bus lanes to continue in operation during the construction of the LRT.
Yeah, so again, my question is, it's described as a 2-lane parkway and a transit corridor, and then it says that the transit corridor could be used for buses until such time that the light rail or other mass transit solution is employed. When did it become 4 lanes? You see what I'm saying? Are you telling me that the original record of decision had 2 lanes of general traffic at 12 feet wide each, and then a transit corridor of 63 feet wide? I think, I mean, right now you're showing a platform that is 75 feet of roadway or transit way. When did it become that? If the language says that the transit corridor may be used for buses in the interim, well, that's fine. But the transit corridor that was in the original record of decision, as I read it, was a transit corridor alongside 2-lane parkway. Mm-hmm. When did it become more lanes? When did 2 bus lanes, or are 2 bus lanes what we're considering the transit corridor?
My understanding is there's language in the ROD that that provides or states that additional width is to allow construction of the light rail while the 2 lanes of GP, general purpose, and bus remain operable, the light rail can be constructed and then it can be shifted over.
All right.
So
So we'll move on from this, but going forward, again, I would love to know when that language was changed, when this platform got widened, why we're talking about this type of plan versus what I read in the record decision plainly as a 2-lane parkway with a transit corridor. Bill, did you have a question?
I did, thanks. The Burger Cabin, you mentioned that it's assumed that that would be relocated on site. And I'm not putting this assumption on you. I know this comes from the record of decision, or I believe it comes from the record of decision. But can we just talk about that for a moment? You know, this is a privately owned piece of property. I don't believe that the property owner has ever expressed any interest in relocating the property on site. Could you talk about what it would take to relocate the property on site and what would be involved in that?
So I think the first step we'd have to go back through a reevaluation to see if that's even feasible. So when the ROD was written 20-some years ago, right, they probably thought this was going to happen in 5 years, and they knew that there would probably have to be negotiations with the property owner as well. So there is some land that's being acquired would be needed for this alignment because it's kind of oblong shape across the top here and runs down to the Castle Creek. So I think it's part of a reevaluation, and Jim, you might be able to add more context to that process.
yeah, I mean, during NEPA, you can't negotiate with landowners unless you meet certain criteria. So that just wasn't done. But when they were doing the assessment for the environmental impact assessment or environmental impact statement, and that included the compliance with the historic preservation laws, for whatever reason, that was the determination that was made, that it could be relocated on the property. And what went into that assessment, I can't speculate.
Got it, thank you. So is it fair to assume that from this point forward, if the property owner said, no thanks, I'm not relocating my house, the only option would be, of course, I'm forgetting the legal term here.
Condemnation.
Condemnation.
So Bill, there's going to be 3 alternatives when we go through, and this is kind of the high level that Sarah was looking at. We want you to have all the information so that you can, this is part of it, is, you know, this was planned in the record of decision. There is going to be some hard choices between right-of-way. We're trying to give you a general sense now of what those right-of-way impacts are so that you can evaluate where you think you are as a council. And we're not at the point now of where we've had discussions with owners, discussions about right-of-way acquisition or condemnation. We're just trying to get a feel of where you're out as a council right now as a values conversation, and then we can start to pursue those ideas if you want us to pursue.
Understood, thanks. I just wanted to make sure that the impacts to that particular property were not underestimated. Thanks.
Sure. Okay. The next alternative is the split shot, and this was back in the DEIS days, this was referred to as the couplet. So one way kind of on a new alignment and one way on the existing alignment. So what you're seeing here is that, except with a slight change, we're following the modified direct alignment to use that encumbered transportation right-of-way that's there across from Earl Thomas. We have the inbound coming in on that alignment, and then the outbound goes through some S-curve softening that we'd probably do, and then over the existing Castle Creek Bridge, we would convert Cemetery Lane to a right-in, right-out, and take traffic out to the roundabout that direction. 8th Street would also be right-in, right-out. 7th we'd probably leave alone to bring traffic across. What this option does allow us to do, it allows us to maintain some local access on West Main and North 7th, as well as some parking. So we'll take a look at that here, but let's take a look first at the footprints of this one. So this is narrower since it's half the lanes and no raised median, so we're at 41 foot for the roadway, and we're at 44.5 feet for the cut and cover tunnel. So it is narrower. but it still has the same assumption that the cut and cover would be returned to open space, so less of a footprint cutting across. This is a visualization of that coming into town, just like you saw in the phase PA. What we did on this one is we still held that south edge line, and it still skirts close to Burger Cabin. And we did this just because we wanted to kind of preserve some parking and that local access on the north side. Now, it could be relooked at to split the difference and maybe take away that parking. So that is an option that could be evaluated and get further away from the cabin. So there is no right-of-way on West Main. There still would be some right-of-way, and basically the same right-of-way impacts to the Burger property. Even though it's narrower, you'd wind up with a remainder piece on that north side that couldn't be used, and you'd have to wind up taking it. And then the third option we looked at is the 3-lane shifted bridge. And this is with a bus bypass and S-curve improvements that we've all heard about before. And I want to reiterate on this 3-lane shifted bridge, this is strictly an outbound lane for that third lane. It's not a reversible lane, okay? This is not what we looked at. For this option, you see the new bridge in purple. We have the S-curve improvements that we've been talking about doing through the tight 90 degrees. So we have one GP and one BRT. So we have 4 lanes in the S-curves through that, but we only have 3 lanes across the bridge. So 1 inbound lane, it's just general traffic, basically mixed traffic, general traffic and transit, and 2 outbound lanes, 1 general traffic and 1 BRT. And what we've done with this one, though, is since these are all transit focused, we've added this this feature of a bypass lane. So basically, once the bus got through the cemetery lane, they would divert on the bypass and skirt around the roundabout to a new bus stop that's located a little further west and pick up passengers. Or if they were an express bus, they would just bypass that and go right into the dedicated bus lane. Cemetery lane signal would still be in place, and the red dash denotes the bypass lane, and then the blue line denotes relocating the golf course trail that's along there too. So there are impacts to the golf course for this one. If we looked at the footprint for this, the bridge is 52 feet out to out. This is what we've showed you before, basically for the 3-lane bridge. And it has the 2 lanes out, one lane in, not reversible. And up there on the top figure, we have like a 22-foot roadway just dedicated for the bus bypass. So existing Highway 82 would remain the same, and you know it necks down to 1 lane and then pops out to 2 lanes before the roundabout. Sure.
Could you briefly talk about the statement you just made about these being 2 lanes out, 1 in, and not a reversible center lane? So when was that decision made, by whom, and why, please?
That's what we showed at when we were looking at the 3-lane bridge option with the S-curves back in April. We had always shown just a dedicated outbound to help with outbound transit and promote that movement.
And I'm going to step back. We have looked at the reversible lane about 2015-16, and the most difficult piece about a reversible lanes was the space required for the transitions and the signage in some of those aspects. If it's something you want to explore, it has a lot more impact on right-of-way and some of the function. So it is challenging, and this is the one that we thought became, had the least amount of impact while providing a good outbound system.
Thanks.
So that was the options, and I'm going to let Peter talk about the traffic modeling associated with those options.
Thank you. So the goal of this exercise was to evaluate the various options' impact to general traffic and transit operations. Our focus was the AM and PM peak on weekdays. We identified the AM peak as 8:15 to 9:15 in the morning for the inbound direction, and the PM peak identified as 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. for the outbound direction. The study area was focused along State Highway 82, as shown in the graphic on the right on this slide, all the way from Brush Creek Road on the north end to 5th Street on the south end near downtown Aspen. We built a traffic model for the existing condition modeling July 2024 this year, with a 0.75% annual growth applied through analysis year 2050. That growth rate falls below the 1993 cap volumes on SH 82, on State Highway 82, by year 2050. You can go to the next slide. So look, just focusing in on some of the traffic operational elements of the phased PA here. You have a reduced friction coming from the side streets along Highway 82, allowing for a more smooth entrance in and out of town on a direct alignment compared to the existing 90-degree turns that drivers have to navigate currently. There is a relocated signal currently at Cemetery Lane on State Highway 82, relocated to the intersection of 7th and Main. You can go to the next slide. Looking at the split shot alternative, again, the inbound movement is on that relocated alignment, more direct shot into downtown, and no friction coming from side streets, with the outbound alignment staying on the existing roadway, and a reduced amount of friction with some access modifications on 7th Street and 8th Street to allow for smoother outbound movement. A key feature of this split shot design is the rerouting of the existing southbound left turn going from Cemetery Lane onto State Highway 82 if you're going inbound. This movement is rerouted to turn right from Cemetery Lane, going westbound in the westbound direction, and then drivers would have to execute a U-turn at the Maroon Creek roundabout. And this causes issues at the roundabout, which is currently over capacity. This adds more strain to the existing bottleneck that is the roundabout, and some of the impacts to travel times and congestion can be found on following slides that we'll present. Go to the next one. This is the 3-lane shifted bridge. Again, as Doug mentioned, this provides an outbound bus lane. It maintains the existing alignment. It also provides a roundabout bypass where buses currently get stuck in a queue with vehicles going through the roundabout. For the inbound movement, there is a bus lane only provided through the S-curve, not through the roundabout and not at the bridge. Go to the next slide. This is a summary of travel time results for the outbound direction in this slide. The next slide will have inbound direction. So we're showing results for the existing condition, the no-build condition, no build meaning no action, future conditions with the current geometry, the phased PA, the split shot, and the 3-lane bridge. In orange, those are travel times for transit. In blue, those are travel times for general traffic. I want to emphasize that this is a travel time captured between 5th Street and to Brush Creek. It's not any further east downtown. It begins at 5th Street where that lane drop occurs, going from 2 to 1 travel lane for outbound traffic. So you're looking at your general traffic travel times in the peak direction. That's the PM peak hour for outbound traffic. You see general traffic has the lowest travel time under the phased PA because of that direct alignment and less friction from side streets. And the next best travel time is seen in the 3-lane bridge alternative, and then followed by the split shot, which actually has a higher travel time for general traffic than compared to the no-build, and that's because of that rerouting of the cemetery lane traffic through the roundabout that adds to the friction with existing peak flows leaving town. For transit, the 3-lane bridge provides the best outbound travel time of 12 minutes. That is 2 minutes lower than the phased PA, and that's because of, mostly due to the fact that the 3-lane bridge option includes the roundabout bypass, where, and under the phased PA, vehicles still get caught in that roundabout queue. Buses still get caught in that roundabout queue. And then you can go to the next slide for.
Can I, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so curious on this stuff.
Yeah.
On this direction, on the outbound, one thing that jumps out to me, on the 3-lane bridge, the transit time is 15 minutes in the morning and 11 minutes and 53 seconds in the afternoon. When they're, in the afternoon, you're contending with more traffic, in theory, right? As people are leaving town. How do we explain that?
Signal timing would have a lot to do with that. Your signal timing prioritizes the heavy flows, so that would get in the way of going in an off-peak direction. So
7th is also closed off in the peak. And not in the AM. The right turn from 7th.
right turn from 7th. Right. Yeah, access is allowed turning from going southbound on 7th Street. Vehicles
Do you mind pulling that second microphone down in front of you a little bit? Thanks.
And keep in mind, next week, we're going to go into all the details about every one of these directions. I thought this was important to share for the discussion tonight because it gives you a value comparatively between each of the peak hour ones. And I think it gives you a good idea of like what if you do add that bypass around the roundabout, that has a pretty large impact on the travel times for both. And I think this is just, we're going to get into details on the traffic analysis next week, but this gives you a good sense.
Well, I appreciate that, Pete. I don't necessarily want to get into the details on it. I just want to make sure that it's accurate, and that was something that jumped out strangely to me, so that's why I asked the question. But we feel confident that's accurate.
Yes.
Okay.
As much as a crystal ball is accurate.
As much as a traffic model is accurate.
Yeah.
bear
Yeah,
that
I
in
don't know
mind.
what the reliability factor is on that, but okay, that's good for me on outbound, and I can jump directly to my inbound question or wait for you to present the inbound slide and whatever you prefer.
Yeah, and this is a travel time for a long corridor, so with that signal timing, you do go through 6 different signals that could have a big impact on their
And when you say
travel time.
6, does that include the new signal proposed
Yeah,
at 7th and Main?
yeah, but under the 3-lane bridge, it stays with the existing signal at Cemetery, so.
That wasn't my question, sorry. On the phased PA,
Yeah,
and I'm not sure about the split shot, but on the phased PA, a new light is proposed at 7th and Main.
yes,
Is that factored into these?
yes,
Thank you.
And split shot.
yeah, relocated signal, basically. So for the inbound travel time, keying in on the peak direction travel times, you have over an hour due to the growth from 2024 to 2050. It adds to the gridlock conditions traveling inbound. And comparing the no-build with the phase PA and the 3-lane bridge, there's subtle differences in travel times, but compared to the split shot, this travel time is much higher due to those U-turners that are rerouted from that southbound Cemetery left turn, inhibiting the flow of that roundabout during the morning. So when you look at Transit travel times, it's a similar story. Comparable travel times, Phase PA slightly lower than the no build and the 3-lane bridge, with the split shot having a higher transit travel time because buses are stuck in that vehicular queue at certain points where the exclusive bus lane merges with general traffic around the airport. Can go to the next slide.
Hang on.
Yeah.
You can go back to that slide if you will. I think there might be more than one question. Bill, go ahead.
Thanks so much. My big question here is this growth assumption that you mentioned.
Yeah.
That's having a pretty extraordinary effect. So is it correct to understand that in the existing travel times, that's 2024 traffic levels, and the no build is, the only difference is 2050 projected traffic levels, right?
Correct.
Okay. Can you talk about whose growth assumptions those are and why they make any sense?
Yes, so the growth rate of 0.75% was determined based on, first it was the 1993 cap volumes identified. Those, if traffic were to reach that level in 2050, it would have to grow at 1.3%. So we had that as the upper echelon, with a growth rate found from CDOT's online transportation information system. That growth rate was identified as 0.45% through 2050. So we struck a balance between those two growth rates of 0.45 and 1.3%. We landed at 0.75. So going from 2024 to 2050 is about a 20% increase from current traffic. So adding to the queue, adding to the back of that queue is, 20% more traffic, all having to go through that extensive travel time, weighing that travel time a little bit higher than you would logically think.
Yeah, understand the impacts, trying to figure out the assumption. This may be a better question for Pete and Jen, but is it factual that 2024's traffic levels are equal to or lesser than 1990-ish, 1993 traffic levels?
We're still quite a bit lower, and
We are lower today than we were then.
yes, quite a bit, like
Thank you.
thousands.
So we've had a negative growth rate in the last 30-something years, not a positive growth rate. So it's a strange assumption to say that we would have positive growth rates to 2050, to me. Just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Clarifying question, the 2050 projected traffic was still below the 1993 levels? Thank you.
Please verbalize answers so everyone in the room can
Yes.
hear them.
Sorry.
John?
Now, were these traffic patterns also gauged against our local bus ridership?
Okay.
Because I know our bus ridership has grown since 1993 considerably.
Our BRT system is outstanding, and it's created a system to where our levels could drop. So what I do with people is I take them, and we have our monthly, yearly counts that I sit down with people. And the reason that those have dropped so substantially is because of that BRT system and all the mobility systems that we have in place in this city. That's allowed us to keep these levels considerably lower. For planning purposes, it would be pretty troublesome to count on lower growth when you're trying to plan out something that's supposed to be at 50 years. And so this was an in-between that fits the criteria, and it's lower than what CDOT would use in their studies generally. On their state highway, they use 2% down in the valley. And so this is a good measure of what you would want to plan for, and not necessarily, you wouldn't want to plan for negative, because it would lead you to some different decisions. Does that make sense, Bill?
It was John's question.
Everyone.
I'm happy to respond, but it was John's question, so. Do you have anything to say?
No,
Well,
that answered my question.
I'll jump in and say, I agree with you. I don't think we should plan for negative, but I also don't think that the positive growth rate is probably reflective of what will be actual conditions. I just don't know where that incremental vehicular traffic growth comes from. Like, I think we have a great system, and I'm grateful for that, a great transit system, and I'm grateful for that, amongst other mobility alternatives. I don't think that we can count on increased utilization of that system, and I don't think we can count on increased vehicular traffic. I just don't think either of those are true. I think we've reached critical mass, if that's the right term, or stabilization. Like, not much is going to change that I can imagine that's going to change those numbers significantly.
We'll take your comments in and we'll take another look this
Thanks.
week and see if there needs to be an adjustment.
I just wanted to really understand where these numbers came from more than anything, but thank you for explaining.
Pete, if we come back to that as a discussion point, I'm going to have a couple questions around RAFTA travel times and their schedule. There were a couple of representations there that I'd be interested to know what, how they correlate with the current RAFTA service and what RAFTA sees going forward. Currently, it's about 14 minutes from Brush Creek to the 4th Street bus stop, and it's depicted there as taking, no matter what we do or nothing, it's described as taking up to 30 or 40 minutes. Split shots, 40 minutes, 3-lane bridge, 30 minutes. Phased PA is a 28 minutes. So I'll just have more questions around that kind of transit travel times.
We'll get into the details
Yeah.
next week.
Thanks.
So this is a slide about scoring the options based on the results from the traffic model, including travel times that we just looked at, as well as other metrics such as overall congestion and transit travel times as well. So this is a scaling of 1 to 5 scores. Score of 3 meaning the alternative operates similar to the no build. Score of 1 to 2 would operate worse than the no build, and 4 to 5 would operate better than the no build. So considering all of those metrics, this led us to an overall score where the split shot performed the worst and the 3-lane bridge performed the second best, slightly lower score than the phased PA. Some of the weights you see here are based on a typical project that would consider both transit and traffic as important. Can move on to the next subject, where Doug will discuss some differentiators between the options.
Thanks, Peter. So what we did with the traffic and some of the other impacts is we kind of looked at these on each alternative, and I want to take you through some of what would be key differentiators in the decision-making process for coming up with a preferred alternative. So if we took a look at the first one, the phased preferred alternative, we noted that we have dedicated bus lanes that move more people during morning and evening peak hours in both directions. We have faster transit travel times, encourage transit use, thereby limiting vehicle trips into Aspen and improving mobility for the community. The new bridge facilitates emergency evacuation by providing a second Castle Creek crossing or a redundant crossing. The raised median introduces safety by preventing head-to-head crashes for this segment of State Highway 82, where today out there you don't have a separated median between the oncoming traffic. And this is also utilizing, as we mentioned earlier in the presentation, the existing transportation right-of-way that's already been encumbered. So it minimizes additional right-of-way impacts and facilitates future expansion of the LRT. For the split shot, we have that issue of as Peter honed in on, the U-turns from Cemetery Lane at the Maroon Creek roundabout. This is really impacting traffic in both the inbound and outbound direction. for this model. And there could be a need for additional, or would be a need for additional right-of-way if an LRT had to follow the existing alignment, and that could cut across some old Thomas property, so that would be a differentiator that's weighed. For the 3-lane shifted bridge with the bus bypass and the S-curve improvements, this bridge, yeah, it's a new bridge. It adds an extra lane across the bridge, which is helpful, but it doesn't provide redundancy. It doesn't provide a second crossing, basically, of the Castle Creek for emergency evacuation. And it doesn't reduce a head-to-head conflicts opposing traffic. With no inbound bus lane, it does not accommodate forecasted trips. It does not limit vehicle trips into town, and it doesn't improve mobility for the community. The bus bypass lane impacts Aspen City Golf Course, the Golf Course Trail, and the Bugsy Barnard Park. And all those things feed into the criteria, and I'll let Jim talk about that.
Thanks, Doug. So, as we talked about before, when we thought about doing this sensitivity analysis, we wanted to reflect on what a supplemental EIS might look like, and presumably that would involve using the same criteria that were looked at during the EIS stage. So these are the criteria that were used to differentiate and rate the alternatives back during that time. So again, this is some crystal balling, but trying to make some judgments about, based on these criteria, how the alternatives might fare. We came up with these ratings here, which weren't easy to do, but that's our judgments. Just generally characterizing these without going through each, the first 3 criteria really reflect the fact that the PA provides both inbound and outbound transit lanes, whereas the 3-lane shifted with the other improvements that Doug talked about only provides the outbound capacity, and that's reflected in the ratings. And also, the roundabout issues with the split shot certainly affect the ratings related to the capacity and operational issues with that alternative. Fourth down, the future transit options and upgrades, those ratings really reflect the ability of the phase PA and the split shot to accommodate future upgrades to light rail. Also, during the EIS, there was some importance put on emergency evacuation, and those ratings reflect for the PA and the split shot the fact that they would provide a secondary redundant route for emergency evacuation and access. The safety ratings are comparable, but the preferred alternative, interim preferred, and the split shot would provide some separation between the opposing lanes of traffic, and Doug spoke about that earlier. In terms of the intersection safety, with the preferred alternative and the split shot, both the main and 7th signal does control access for all movements, which does provide a safety benefit. The bike ped ratings reflect the fact that with both the preferred alternative and the 3-lane, bike ped users would use in the case of the interim PA, the existing sidewalk that exists there now, and with the 3-lane shifted, they would use a new sidewalk on that existing alignment. Split shot rated better because of the ability to put a new sidewalk on that new bridge south of the existing one. And last thing I'll mention, the right-of-way impacts, the preferred alternative and split shot ratings reflect the fact that they would make use of the existing encumbered transportation corridor. So based on our estimates, the 3-lane shifted with the other improvements, the S-curve softening and the bus bypass would require roughly more than double the right-of-way, and that would mostly come from the golf course property. What the ratings don't reflect for right-of-way is the fact, and we're going to talk about this more during next week's presentation, is there is a possibility that the property under the bridge might have to be acquired for safety reasons, but that isn't reflected in that rating. Next slide, please. So I think, Pete, you were just going to talk a little bit about next week.
So this is a lot of information that's really impactful in this community, obviously. And so we want to take your questions tonight, and we want to be able to take some of these questions back for the next week and then really analyze, because you've asked some good questions tonight already that I think we're going to take back and look at again and make sure that we present this fully. The right-of-way discussion is obviously very impactful, and we want to make sure that we have that absolutely correct for next week's decisions. But do you have any additional questions tonight or anything additional you'd like us to review in the next week?
Is this the entirety of tonight's presentations?
Are there pieces that you want us to pull out that you'd like to discuss?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is kind of random, and this doesn't mean this is what I support, but if we as a council decided to go forward with the preferred alternative, how quickly would construction commence?
That's a challenging question because there's different factors in play here as far as there's probably some legal pieces that we'd need to go through that would probably take a couple years, and that would probably be through the court. But I would say that as far as design and prep, design could be done fairly quickly, probably a year, and then the construction could commence. But you'd have that initial probably 2 years that would be spent most likely in a legal system.
And we would have the use of the Castle Creek Bridge during the construction.
You would have full use of Castle Creek Bridge while the construction of the preferred alternative would be in place.
Thanks.
And this will be covered a bit in the funding and financial assessment. There's also a need for where this project fits into the other needs of the western slope and how, in a very unique way, transportation infrastructure is funded in this state compared to any other state I've ever worked in. With our regional transportation commissions having to be on the intermountain transportation plan, which is a 10-year plan, and it has to compete against other projects for funding because the state is underfunded for its transportation needs.
Thanks. Bill?
Thanks. I guess I should say firstly, I'm hopeful that we can have a conversation amongst the five of us tonight and maybe even be able to make some decisions. Hopefully, that's what I hope to get to tonight rather than wait for a subsequent presentation. But one thing I was hoping to have more information on for today, which could certainly come later, it is based on my past requests for a holistic analysis of pinch points, and there was a little bit of mention in it in the traffic analysis document, but not a lot, and it didn't. There was less creativity in it than I was hoping for. To be honest, Pete, you and I have talked about some of these ideas that I hoped would at least be considered over time, but I didn't get much of that there. And again, it could come later. It's not critical for that to come in conjunction with this decision, but you know, big questions like what could we do to improve the Cemetery Lane intersection that I think have just as much impact on traffic flow as the Castle Creek Bridge does, if not more. You know, does the 8th Street bus stop and pedestrian crossing belong in that location? Are there better options for that? Just because it's there today doesn't mean that it is the best solution forever. So I was hoping for some more information and some more creativity and some more analysis of that, particularly the entire corridor. And I think that the rest of council was supportive of that analysis. I didn't get it in the materials that were presented today. I don't know if there's something that's being held back for next week that we haven't seen yet, but I was hopeful for more of that, hopefully at some point, particularly, or maybe even if regardless of the decision from council, I think that's smart to analyze those things.
Great comment. A lot of this, like Cemetery Lane and some of the pieces to the roundabout, are impacted by the record of decision. Because we've gone to the state in the past and the federal, and we've met with them on some of your ideas. And they've said that actually is against the record of decision as it currently sits. And so we haven't presented those until we understand where you all want us to go as far as a direction. And so that's why some of those details aren't going to be presented yet, because I have to have an idea of where you're headed as a council. And then those ideas can play out, because then we're looking at an SEIS, or we're looking at a different process where we can include those. So that answers that piece of it. A lot of the pinch points in the city will be discussed more as far as, especially around the S-curves, and some of those pieces on our side that aren't impacted by the record of decision, we'll be discussing more in detail next week. Is that?
Perfect.
Pete, if I may add to that, I think also there's a real time constraint in terms of how much we could do to prep for this meeting. So I think now that we do have a traffic model set up, one of the great features of that is we can do scenario testing. We can look at different improvements and see how they function.
Are we prepared to go forward with any of the other items that are scheduled for next week? It's 5:15 and we've got everybody assembled here, and we don't have to stop this meeting if we've got more work to do. Are we prepared to go into any other topics?
We could do general of each topic if you'd like to. Some of the people from Jacobs worked on different pieces, but Jim can speak to several items of that if it's helpful. The traffic model and some of that stuff, we couldn't get into the full details because you really need visual that would help that.
So the council's particularly going to be interested in the bridge sidewalk removal, the 3-lane bridge options, and the S-curve refinement. Can the consulting team present those this evening?
Yes.
I'm seeing yes. Do you need just a moment to switch gears, or are you
No, I
good to
think we're
keep
good.
rolling? Great, thanks.
We're going to load up a different presentation.
Does that work for all of council? I'm sorry.
Let's
Sort of
get more
jumped in
information
ahead of-
out tonight if we can, that'd be great. Going off of what you've already presented, though, I think Ward has maybe some questions and clarifications. I want to get comment from Sam as well. I had a couple thoughts on that last stuff. The split shot and the traffic light at 7th. Did you look at, or is there a possibility for, in a split shot alignment, which just has inbound traffic on that, is that possible to design without a traffic light at 7th and Main? I had questions around some of those, the modeling times. I had some questions around differences in some of those designs. I think the 3-lane shifted is presented with a slip lane for the roundabout, but maybe the split shot was not. Wondering why that is and whether or not that could be part of the split shot discussion. And then when it comes to the roundabout, what are our opportunities for improvements there as it's going to interface with some new scenario? As it's been pointed out a couple times, the record of decision did not necessarily anticipate or wasn't designed with the roundabout. And alternatives were also not screened with a roundabout. So I'm wondering about what are our opportunities for more improvements to that intersection?
I'm going to jump in here. So yes, all of those things can be studied. All of them can. The question is which pieces do you need to make a decision for the community about your next steps? So I'm going to push back at you a little bit to say is we can continue the study that's been happening for 40 years. But if that piece of information is critical for you to be able to make a decision, we absolutely can come back to you with a proposal to fund to study it. However, I really believe we're not at that point right now in the community. I think the community is asking for clarity and how balancing this value conflict over open space versus transit versus public transit, private vehicle use, and accessibility and evacuation. So I would just encourage you to maybe pull it up. We will definitely bring you back some information, but I don't right now understand what pieces of that are essential to the council's decision-making. Thank you.
Well, for me, this is a system-wide improvement that we're looking for. We're impacting both general traffic as well as transit. And all of the modeling numbers that we're being given, all of the information that we're being given are being given to us with this current roundabout configuration. So under current conditions, certain alternatives are scoring or reflecting certain improvements or lack of improvement. But if that's because of the current roundabout that we have, and yet there's opportunity to make improvements there. For example, if there's a bus slip lane that's being proposed heading down valley, and we're being told that it's gonna impact the golf course, well, what about moving the roundabout over? I believe the RAFTA and transit is already responsible for the park and ride, or kiss and ride, or bike and ride, whatever it is over there. So we're being given conditions to evaluate these different alternatives on, but we're only looking at a stretch from the roundabout, which in my opinion needs improvement, and probably could have had some improvement done when we just cemented it recently, but didn't. And so we're evaluating these, but we want to make true improvement for transit. And so that's why, I mean, to me, we should be looking at how to make this system better. But right now, we're just comparing apples to oranges, because it's 3-lane here and split shot there and preferred alternative there, but they all run into the roundabout. They're being treated slightly differently, and I don't understand that, but I'm just saying, like, we should be looking at this as like making real improvement. We saw some times that were given to us that were reflective of Brush Creek to 5th Street and stuff like that. There are 5 other lights, not including the one that's proposed for 7th. There's 5 other lights that are in between here. Anyway, so for me, I'm looking for more than just making a simple decision here, but really, what can we bring to improve our transit corridor? So for me, I would love to know about improvements to the roundabout. No, I'm not asking for a study at this time, but I think that those kind of opportunities should be at least availed to us. Ward, questions or information for future discussion?
Yeah, for future discussion, I'd like more clarity on the property under the bridge have to be purchased for safety reasons. I'd like to have more clarity on that. And certainly have clarity on, I know going through the Merle Thomas open space that the projections are for the width of the bus and the general traffic, but not for the light rail. The light rail was for future consideration, yet on the cut and cover, it's built wide enough to have the LTR. So Tori's expressed this many times over the months or years as exactly how do we wind up with the width that we have, and that the bus lane could be used in the interim until LTR is available and can be funded and accepted by the community. And I think that LTR construction is economically unfeasible. So to keep, if we were to proceed with the preferred alternative, can we get rid of the extra width under the cut and cover? That'd be one question. Another one that I'd like to be addressed is we have a full inspection of the Castle Creek Bridge coming up this fall. If it fails, it's my understanding that the CDOT will pursue constructing the preferred alternative. So I want clarity on that. We all know what happened with the Middle Bridge on Highway 50, and we're really careful about what the condition of the existing Castle Creek Bridge is, coming to load restrictions and all of the negative effects of it dropping below a level that CDOT sees as safe.
Thanks, Ward. Sam, questions or information for further discussion or next meeting, or?
Nope, I appreciate the questions you guys asked. I just look forward to council discussion on this and public comment, so.
John?
Yeah, I've got a quick question I think can be answered tonight. Now, I've been hearing that if we do the three-lane bridge, that there will be no significant traffic disruptions, and I feel that that might be misleading because I believe Power Plant Road won't be usable during certain parts of construction, which is one of the ways out of town. Can you fill me in on that?
So Power Plant Road will have isolated impacts to it. It will still try to funnel some traffic to it, but just with the staging below, it'll impact it. So some of the traffic will have to divert. We did calculate some delays. We still think there are minor delays compared to how traffic moves in the peak hour now. So that's what that's what the delay was focused on, because it bogs down now. So even at slower speeds, you're all going slow, even during construction. So with the shifted bridge, that was the option that would allow one-way traffic each direction without a detour, but that has probably some right-of-way impacts. It does have right-of-way impacts, and we'll get to it here on the slides here.
Okay, and then just a couple comments. I'd just like to point out that yes, the entrance to Aspen has been a bottleneck since almost as long as I've lived here. But I've spent some time driving around the valley and the state recently, and I've noticed it's not just an Aspen issue. Willits has traffic, Basalt has traffic, Glenwood has traffic that I'm really glad doesn't exist in our city. Furthermore, I was down in southern Colorado earlier this week, and I experienced the Bridge 50 closure myself, and I waited in traffic for over an hour. Traffic was backed up miles in both directions, and I really don't want to see that happen here. I don't think the business community would appreciate it. I don't think the citizens would appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks. All right, why don't we get to last parts of presentation. If you have a little bit more information we can share tonight before we adjourn, then that'd be great.
Sure, let me reshare.
Yeah. Yeah, I might need some help, Doug. Okay.
I got your back.
So, stemming from questions from council and some discussion during the April workshop, we did spend some time looking at feasibility implications of not including sidewalk on a new three-lane bridge. And, what trade-offs that would be, what benefits to reducing the right-of-way impacts, reduce costs, but how might it affect the bike ped connectivity and movement there. So to do that, we looked at different policies, Fed, state, and city policy on bike ped connectivity. We did look at the use of that existing connection on the bridge, looked at volume of usage, for example, and we looked for alternate routes. We did some analyses that are reflected in the memo on whether there's a viable alternate route and how it might affect movement to the school campus. And the high-level findings, number one, if you look at the policies, state, federal, because there's an existing bike ped connection there, we can't sever it without providing a reasonable alternative. And reasonableness is a bit subjective, and we talked to the CDOT bike ped folks about that, but it relates to length of, how much you might increase the existing trip for bike peds that they're currently doing. As shown in the findings, the existing sidewalk is very much used. It provides a vital connection. It's identified as such in the bike ped plan for the city. As mentioned, the policies require that if we were to sever that, we'd have to provide an alternate route, and of note, it has to meet ADA requirements, American Disability Act requirements, which can be fairly stringent. So we didn't find really a viable alternative. You know, the ones that you're seeing here, you know, we present information in the memo about increased length and travel times. I think relative to the trade-off of what, you know, might be saved in terms of right-of-way acquisition, we didn't see a real benefit to not including a sidewalk on a new 3-lane Castle Creek Bridge, was the upshot of what we found.
The 3-lane bridge that you presented us had the pedestrian corridor on it.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Questions there? Yep.
Yeah, I know I discussed this with Pete when we got the Hallam Street in improvement. And to me, there's an alternative bridge that's a few blocks away that is a dedicated ped bike bridge at the end of Hopkins, or shortly uphill from there. So I'm wondering, why would that not qualify as a alternative route? Because it's only a few blocks out of the way.
That's a big few blocks. And so what we found in those years that we've looked at this, right, is it's 50-50. People use that Maralt underpass, go under there, and 50% come out and use the bridge. And so what we found is there's a huge disconnect when you're trying to cross safely on Main Street with bikers. And so the people that are using that bridge are typically going on the north side of town. The other ones are going to downtown on the Maralt. And so if you take away that one avenue for the one group, you're going to run into other issues like safety crossing Main Street. Main Street's a barrier for bikers. And so that improvement's made a huge difference as far as how people move in this community. And you got to remember, e-bikes are becoming more popular. So that connection has really been valuable to us as a community. Does that answer some of that?
Yeah, I understand that Main Street is a barrier. I mean, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, so you got to remember that you got to remember that he did kind of, you need to provide something that's adequate. And, you know, the ADA on Maralt, we could probably make some changes and get it ADA, you know, over to that area. But, yeah, there's a lot of differences between using the bridge and Maralt Bridge as far as timing for pedestrians. And so a lot of times you got to remember how the bridge used to be, where you had that 3-foot, 2-foot wide, and everybody is trying to use that shared space, and people are bouncing into the roadway. I mean, I had pictures of people in baby strollers out on the highway. And so pedestrians are always going to take the avenue that is the quickest. It's just how pedestrians are. Generally, it's the shortest. And so if that bridge is there, they are going to use that bridge in an unsafe manner unless we provide something that does have that connectivity to the south side of the city.
Yeah, so I'm just curious with the amount of money we're talking about here. We're talking an underpass at the lumberyard, a bicycle ped underpass. There are a couple of them on the ABC trail that we go, for the Truscott, where you go under the road. A new planned one for the lumberyard. Is it feasible to have an underpass of Main Street to provide that north-south passage? There are traffic lights, but I understand that Main Street is a barrier to bicycle traffic.
That's a detail that I think what you're asking, can we essentially kind of do the Glenwood where we put the pedestrian bike on the side and kind of bury it underneath the highway? That's we're not to that point yet, but if we're wanting to get into that kind of world of exercise, that's probably down the path a little bit.
Any other questions on this? And I think this inquiry is really generated by just trying to see if there was feasibility for a 3-lane bridge at the first place. And you've shown that it can happen with the pedestrian and bikeway attached to it.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to detach it next to it. You'd wind up with a big gap between the two bridges.
not a question that we had asked you to look at, but do 4 lanes fit through the current S-curves? Or through that right-of-way, through a bridge with right-of-way? Would 4 lanes of traffic, not with a pedestrian and bike, but do 4 lanes fit in the?
We're
right of way?
pushing 4 lanes through the S-curves in the refined option that we're looking at, and you probably could push 4 lanes without a sidewalk. I'm not sure how that would be phased, how we'd have to look at that. But
Just wondering if the actual width.
there would probably be some right-of-way needed. I'm thinking it's 60 feet. We're looking at 52 right now with the 3-lane, but that's with the sidewalk. So it'd be close.
We didn't lay it out.
No, we didn't lay it out.
Thank you, yeah, okay.
But they did lay out 4 lanes with the softening proposed.
Right.
Correct.
That is 4, right?
Correct.
Plus sidewalks on both sides.
Yep.
Any other questions on bridge sidewalk removal? I think we have 2 more maybe that we could share tonight.
So I'll talk about the right-of-way needs for the 3-lane bridge options. So I just want to step back, and in April, we presented the bridge feasibility study, and we presented 3 different options for the 3-lane, and we did note at that time the 3-lane centered option, which did also involve a detour, did not require additional right-of-way, okay? Now, we've looked at the 3-lane faster and the 3-lane shifted, and both of those still require right-of-way. If we shifted it north, that's even a little bit more right-of-way with that 3-way north option. So basically, the bottom line is there's no 3-lane bridge option supporting 2 lanes in construction completely avoids right-of-way. So to support traffic in both directions to build a bridge, you're going to need to take some right-of-way to accomplish that. Now, you can do it with a companion detour in one direction over the bridge. You can do that with the centered option.
And please explain that a little bit further.
So
Right-of-way, you're saying that there's no change to right-of-way because it's 4 feet, but we already have that available within the right-of-way?
no, we're going to need an extra 4 feet. Actually, probably a little bit more than 4 feet. We overhang 4 feet, so we would want a little bit extra room. And I'll show you a little sketch we have here that kind of illustrates the issue of the 3-lane shifted specifically. So with the 3-lane shifted, it's shown in the orange outline on this figure. So the orange is the proposed bridge, the blue, dash blue is the existing bridge, and we have what we're calling a permanent easement instead of right-of-way. We actually figured out we could probably do a permanent easement that has air rights over the property, still build the bridge, and CDOT could maintain the bridge with that permanent easement and not extend the right-of-way out. So when we say right-of-way, now we're talking about a permanent easement in place of that. The issue is the residents below, and you can see the blue line, or the green dash line kind of cuts through it. That's probably the needs we'd have for a permanent easement. While the easement itself is not harmful to the structure, we feel like if you look at it in elevation view, it kind of shows. So again, dash blue is the existing bridge. The orange would be the shifted bridge, which overhangs the south right-of-way limit by about 4.6 feet. Conservatively, if we had a 10-foot permanent easement off of the south right-of-way line, that overhangs. Again, it's an air easement, but the issue is now you have this bridge that's shifted over, and when the snowplow comes through, because he's going to be right on the edge there, it's going to probably push snow over the barrier and onto the structure. Or if there's a person outside, it could land on a person. So the other thing is just the constructability of the bridge being in proximity to this structure. So when you look at the bridge, this is just the superstructure part, but there's the pier that we built for the substructure, and the pier's maybe not in this exact location, but it's back a little bit, so there'd be some excavations for that. And we're not sure the contractor would take on that risk. First of all, building that close to the structure and excavating around the structure. So this is why we think this is a high potential for an acquisition that would need to happen early in the process, and not during construction when a contractor maybe won't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Is it fair to say that in both the phase preferred alternative and the 3-lane bridge shifted, there is likely one private residence that needs to be acquired or condemned in each of those scenarios?
Potentially, condemnation could happen in either one of those scenarios.
To one residence in
To
each
one
scenario?
residence.
Obviously, a different residence in each scenario. Thank you.
Go ahead. Pardon?
I'm gonna say there's probably more than one right now, and we're still fitting.
Well,
In which scenario?
but there's
This
other-
scenario over the bridge, that is the truth, with the bridge. The rest of it, through the S-curves, there is probably some impacts to those properties along that route. Does that make sense?
No, but maybe I wasn't listening properly. Are you saying that in the 3-lane shifted, there's potentially more private property impact than in the phase preferred alternative?
So, sorry, the question I was addressing was, you asked specifically about a potential condemnation of one potential property. There are other right-of-way impacts through the S-curves for the 3-lane shifted, like the Scientology building on the corner there, and as well as some of the condo properties. So there's right-of-way impacts associated with that, as well as there's some right-of-way impacts for the bridge approach to the property that's next to 10 Harbor Lane.
Right.
But those are narrow swaths,
And
right?
most of them, in your reports, referred to them as temporary construction.
It could be temporary, there might be some slivers of permanent, yeah.
Understood.
Right.
But what I really wanted to get at is understanding the major impacts, which is a condemnation, the house can't be used anymore. The only way we're gonna be able to do these projects is by acquiring or condemning one of those two properties in each scenario, right?
It's still speculation, but it's a risk.
That's what I wanted to understand. Thank you.
Just to follow up on the preferred alternative, the Berger property is the only property that would have to be relocated, whereas on the 3-lane or 3-lane shifted, perhaps under the bridge, it might have to be, I doubt that structure can be moved. It's not historically designated either.
It's not historic, but it probably couldn't be moved, yeah. S-curve refinement. So, following up from the April meeting, we took option 2, which was favorable by the council, and we've refined it by setting it up for an interim phase and an ultimate phase. So this is basically showing the interim phase at the east end of the bridge, tying into the existing 2 lanes. So we would bring the outbound transit lanes denoted in the orange shading around to that bus stop at 8th, and they would still merge in with the traffic as it does today and go out on the bridge. Coming in, you develop that bus lane again, they'd stop, make their stop and come around. But again, this has the curve softening, and there's some right-of-way impacts with the curve softening, as well as some easements needed for that reconstruction. We did dive a little deeper. We did 15% design on this, and we found some storm sewer that we probably need to make some adjustments to, and that's why we have a little extra easement associated with this design. We did refine North 7th a little bit to kind of do a button hook there so traffic could turn around and go back out, because we were not allowing, we removed that access to Hallam. We did add in, per the recommendation, add in the 8th Street access as a right turn only onto 82 or Hallam. So that's the refinements we made there. We did get some survey on some of these corners to help refine our impact limits. And we also refined kind of the south to Main Street connection, which is shown in the lower left corner. So this is, but into town, this is kind of the same way, or as you go on Main, it's basically the same configuration. Now, one thing we did do differently for the ultimate configuration, this would be on the west side of the bridge, basically, the cemetery lane. So when you bring that, for the ultimate configuration, we're talking about a 3-lane bridge serving that outbound lane. What we have here, we're showing a bus priority queue jump at Cemetery Lane. So basically, the figure in the lower right kind of illustrates what would happen. The bus would come up to the signal, and traffic would come up to the signal. Actually, this signal would be kind of timed with the bus making the stop at near 8th, and it would be actuated as it progresses toward the signal. It would give a red light to the general traffic heading outbound and prioritize the bus lane to do a bypass of that queued traffic. So to do that, we would have to do some intersection widening here at Cemetery Lane to facilitate that. There'd be some additional tree impacts associated with this, as well as some property impacts probably to Merle Thomas, some some needs for easements and right-of-way on the south side there, and that's been can be a tricky process to navigate.
Question on that, the Merle property on that, would that be a permanent easement option, or just temporary for?
Right-of-way and temporary, so that we bump out the right-of-way to accommodate the footprint, and then temporary easement to put in the construction slopes. Now, one thing that we might need here is a wall, because it's kind of bermed up in that area, but we weren't exactly sure on that, so that would something that we'd have to evaluate a little bit further. That a wall could minimize that right-of-way need or the temporary easement need.
But that wall would be on the Merle Thomas property?
Yeah, yes. But it would be in whatever new right-of-way portion that was impacting the Merle Thomas property, yes.
On the previous slide, you had a historical, you had the historical property impacted.
Still impacting that, just with some slope grading that from doing the curve widening and relocating the sidewalk. There's some slopes that need graded in and some tree impacts associated with that.
But the building itself?
The building is fine, would not impact the building. This is just another view of the ultimate as the outbound bus comes through. On this one, we did take away the 8th Street access, just to not conflict with that bus lane that goes outbound. It could be evaluated whether it stays or goes, but on this one, we removed it, kept it in the interim condition or the initial phase. And have basically from here, from the S curve on in is the same as the interim. There's no real changes, so it'd be the same stuff. Really, what happens is the bus lane just continues outbound. Okay. So this is no different than the initial phase. Again, we remove that zipper lane. We make it more of a conventional merge as opposed to the zipper that's happening out there now. Basically, when you look at the refinement, we did modeling on this one as well for 2050. We had the 8th Street access in for the initial phase and removed for the ultimate. In the AM peak hour inbound, there's really no real benefit of the S-curve widening. For the outbound PM peak, there's really no travel benefits for the general traffic between the initial phase and the no-build option. There's a slight gain for the transit travel time because we're pushing the merge up, allowing that bus to continue through the S-curves. And there's minute travel benefits generated for the general traffic between the ultimate phase and the no-build option for when the ultimate build out, and then there's a better gain for the transit travel times with that bus queue jump at Cemetery Lane.
Yeah, Bill?
And when you say ultimate phase, that means in conjunction with a 3-lane bridge, right?
In conjunction with a 3-lane bridge,
Thank you.
correct. The costs we developed were based on the 15% level design. I noticed we had some increased right-of-way and easement costs. The right-of-way increased slightly, easement jumped a little bit more because of the additional storm sewer work. The ultimate costs include reconstructing the Cemetery Lane for the transit priority queue jump that I showed you on the figure. However, these costs do not include the 3-lane bridge itself, so it's just the roadway work up to the bridges. So the initial phase for the 2-lane is 37 million, and that's with the estimate for the right-of-way and TCEs. The ultimate phase, the delta between that is basically 9 million of a delta between the initial and ultimate. Now, I want to point out that in the bridge feasibility study we did in April, we actually had in those costs for those for the approaches of the 4.3 million, the 698,000 for utilities and traffic control, and the 2 million for design, NEPA, and CE and I. So those were already accounted for in those bridge costs. So really, the extra costs would be the right-of-way and TCEs with that bridge. But that bridge cost we presented did not include all the S-curve widening. Okay.
These right-of-way and TCE costs are specific to the S-curve refinement, not the 3-lane shifted, right? So we're not talking about the one residence that we were looking at before.
Correct.
This is
Separate.
specific. Understood. Thanks.
Both sides of the bridge, basically.
And they're theoretical because they're all to be negotiated with private property owners.
That's correct. So really, benefits in the initial phase, reduces intersection conflict points, increases safety on the corners, extends the bus lanes within the S-curves, which is helpful for the buses. Some of the cons are there's negligible traffic gains for this. It does not address the congestion or the other pinch points, as we know, the roundabout, i.e. Does not prioritize inbound transit because it starts after the bridge. It does not address the aging bridge or emergency egress concerns, just the S-curve improvements in the initial phase by itself. And it's a high capital cost for a minimal gain. For the ultimate phase, the benefits are some of the same intersection benefits for reducing conflict points, but it does provide an additional lane for emergency egress across the bridge. Extends the outbound bus lane past Cemetery Lane, which prioritizes outbound transit. It provides some outbound traffic gains for both general and transit, but general's not a lot better. Some of the cons, it does not prioritize inbound transit again. It does not address congestion at other pinch points, i.e. the roundabout. Does not provide community a redundant emergency access. And again, it has a high capital cost. That's all we had on that.
Just keeps getting more and more fun, doesn't it? And I think those are the 3 items that you were suggesting that maybe we could do tonight.
Yeah, I would suggest taking a break. I mean, it's a lot to absorb.
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
At this point, the more detailed traffic modeling, I think, has value, but it probably be overkill for tonight. But anything that council would like us to contemplate, to the best of our abilities, answer for next week, and then I'd appreciate, Mr. Mayor, that we just circle back to public input. So we have a number of members of the community that probably would like to share their perspectives with the council, and I just want those folks to be prepared about possible time limits for individual speakers and for public comment collectively, because it is not a public hearing.
John?
So when we meet next week, is there any way we could get some information about what our current estimated evacuation times are from the city?
Yes, we can provide you that modeling.
Thank you.
Are there any other requests for information?
Not requests. I'd like to say a few words tonight. I'd welcome discussion on where everyone's head is to this point. I don't know if you'd rather have that next week or not, but,
Yeah, I'd rather hold it till next week. I think it could be premature, but I also, one thing that's been of concern of mine is, we've got a lot of people that are trying to really influence this, and I want us all to be on the same page with information and stuff. I think this council needs to talk in depth before we start really sharing necessarily what we think at this time. We have a couple more items to come back to us. And I think next, because we've taken on this additional information tonight, we'll have plenty of opportunity for real good discussion and direction perhaps at our next meeting.
fair enough. I'd still like to make a couple of points tonight, if
course.
that's okay. Firstly, and most importantly, thanks to the team for all the hard work. I know a lot has gone into this in a short amount of time, so I'm really appreciative. And it's informed me heavily. Number two, a couple members of the community have pointed out the fact that I live in the neighborhood that is adjacent to the phase preferred alternative, and have asked whether I'm conflicted or not. Mr. Jim True has done an analysis on that was provided to council today. His determination was that I am not conflicted more than anyone else is. This is something that impacts everybody and does not provide me any financial benefit or to the contrary, hurt me financially. No way to determine that. So I want the public to know that it's been evaluated, it's been examined and determined not to be relevant. And lastly, I think, two more things. Regarding public input, I obviously value the input of our community and everyone that this will affect, and of course there are many people that this will affect. But I think we've overwhelmingly heard from the community on what the different viewpoints are for the last 50 years, and I don't want to spend hours and hours and hours listening to the same things over and over again. I'm so deeply appreciative of the feedback that has been provided. I'm not trying to stifle public input at all when I say this, but there have been so many opportunities for public input. I don't think that there's new comments and new input that's going to be provided, so I don't want to spend our time doing that, and if there's a way for us to collect any incremental feedback that the public does want to provide in a way that's not in a public meeting, I think that would serve all of us well. Lastly, I ask the four of you to be prepared to make a decision. This is the most critical decision that the five of us will ever have to make on this council. I'm confident in that statement. And it's time that we do something. You know, as John shared, the experience that Gunnison and the surrounding communities are going through right now is brutal. And for Aspen, it might even be worse. I don't know the geography of Gunnison very well, but I know we've basically got one way in and out in the winter, and I don't know that Aspen could recover from a similar situation to what they're going through right now. So I don't want us to have the proverbial, and God forbid, the literal blood on our hands if we don't act on this. So I ask all of you to please be ready to make a decision on this, act on this. Let's not kick the can down the road. Let's be ready next week to give clear direction to staff on what to do. It's time to make a decision. It's time to make a difficult decision. Thanks.
Thanks. Bill, I'm going to say to you the same thing that I wanted to say to some of the people that have used that same kind of tone in the emails that have been sent to us. I don't need any prodding. I don't need any threats, and I don't need anybody telling me about worst-case scenarios. We are here now because this council took on, or actually the previous council decided to take this back on after 40 years of discussion. I proudly sit here as the mayor and am running these meetings and this process. If we are doing nothing but getting to a decision point, that's what we're doing. So I appreciate that, but I don't need any prodding. We are on a good path here. I'm glad we're here together. Thank you to all the citizens that have come out tonight. That's fantastic. We will get your input. Yeah, I think we're all gearing up to a position where we're going to be able to make decision. But as I said in the beginning of the meeting, you know, there's been a lot of really strong language used in some of our emails that we've received. And I appreciate people advocating on behalf of their perspective and their viewpoints. But some of the language that is kind of threatening and doomsday speak and the like, you know, that's just not why I'm here. So thank you. Ward.
Yeah, I'm curious how the rest of the council feels about the memo that was released. Is that a confidential memo for Bill's?
The memo that I prepared today and provided to you is confidential. Standard procedure when an issue comes up about conflict and that I have reviewed, that if, to advise the counselor who has the question as to my opinion, which Bill expressed, that I do not believe there's a conflict. The memo itself and the lengthy analysis is confidential, and you would have to take the same action you did with the other memo if you wish that released.
I would be in favor of releasing that memo, waiving client attorney privilege and making that known to the community.
We could do that at the next meeting through the same resolution, the way we released the last memo. And I'm happy to bring a resolution of that nature back to you.
Okay.
So we would need 3 council members to request that come back to us in our next meeting. We have Ward who is supporting it. We have Bill is supporting it. Yeah. Sam is supporting it. John is supporting it. I'm supporting it. So if we could see something at our next regular meeting, that'd be great. Thank you.
Just a comment, Bill. I want to move forward with this as well. I think that the community expects us to make a decision. I think we have to make a decision. But I think that we've heard a lot of comment from an organized group of people that are in favor of one solution. I think that we need to have public comment available to move forward with this. But I'm definitely in alignment with you on making a decision.
Any other comments for this evening or any other requests for information for our next meeting? We are scheduled to be back here next Monday for another session with a little bit more information and then an opportunity for a robust discussion. I am interested in opening it up for this community to share their viewpoints. So at this time, and I'd like to confirm this maybe through the week, Sarah, but at this time, what I envision is allowing a 3-minute comment period for members of the public at our next work session. We will be strict about 3 minutes. As you heard from Councilman Guth, we don't care for redundancy. We want to hear what you have to say, but our time is valuable, as is yours. So we hope that it's all respected. I'll confirm that through the week, but that's what I envision right now.
And just for the benefit of the public, under those rules, you cannot succeed your time to another person to speak on your behalf. So I just want to ensure the public has clarity about that in the rules of how council operates. Thanks.
Yeah. And that also goes for reading other people's comments and statements, et cetera. Jen.
I just wanted to remind folks that we'll be at Saturday Market. So if you want to have a face-to-face with us, we'd be happy to talk to you. We're going to be at Saturday Market this coming Saturday.
The city booth at the Saturday Market will be taking public input and sharing information about the Castle Creek Bridge and the entrance to Aspen. And I believe council members are planning on being there for some period of the day as well, so you can grab their ear too.
Just for the public to know, I'm committed months ago to going to Maine on the 10th. So I will be neither at the Saturday market nor in person at the next Monday's meeting, but I will certainly be in 2D.
And not in person, but in spirit, for sure.
Months ago, you mean years ago.
Thank you guys very much for all the work that you've done, and we will see you in a week. We appreciate you. Thank you very much for everybody coming out tonight, and as, of course, thank you to GrassRoots. We do not have a regularly scheduled meeting tomorrow, so we will reconvene on Monday, the 12th. Thank you.